This is the Garden of English. I'm Tim Freitas, and today we're going to talk about how to write an intro paragraph for just about any paper you'll ever have to write, whether it's in high school or college or anything like that. So stick around, check it out. If you have not checked out my other video about writing rhetorical analysis intro paragraphs, you're going to want to make sure that you check that out right up here. And the reason why is because that's really the only type of intro paragraph that's not going to actually fit really well into what I'm going to look at with you all today. But I will tell you this, that I have students ask me all the time, how do we write intro paragraphs? And a lot of times they tell me that they've been taught to do this kind of like inverted triangle thing where they go from broad to specific. And although that's an option, it's really not the best option. It's not very engaging. It's not very interesting. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to actually talk about steps that you can take to write an incredibly excellent intro paragraph, whether you're writing about a literary analysis, whether you're writing an argument, and anything else in between. And I'm going to give you examples in the packet that's linked in the description right down below that we're going to look at in just a few minutes. And please note that some of those examples can and actually were from some of the graduate papers that I wrote in college. So these steps really work well. And one of the reasons why they really work well is because they've been around for thousands of years and they've been effective even since when they began. So let's actually get into it. When it comes to an intro paragraph, I have a document here about writing intro paragraphs. And like I said, that's linked in the description right down below. And what happens here is I give four steps that you will naturally want to take when you write an intro paragraph anyway. But these steps actually come from what's called the classical argument structure, which is an argument structure that was created in the universities of yesteryear, right back in ancient Greece and ancient Rome and things like that. And there was basically a six-part structure that was given in the classical argument structure, and it was you would go through the web, you'd go through the background, you'd go through the partition, you'd then confirm your argument, you would then address a refutation, and then you would give this kind of bigger so what. It just so happens that those first three moves, if you move through them well, you will actually produce an excellent intro paragraph. And what's also nice about this classical model that's stood the test of time, so therefore you should probably use it, is that it's actually how you talk as well. It's how you already conceptualize the world. So why don't we actually take this and say, why don't I do what comes natural to me anyway? And that's going to help you write a really strong intro paragraph. So let's go through these steps. I'm not going to actually read my examples. I'm going to let you read those examples, but I will show you where they are, and I'll show you that I've numbered them for you so you can see the steps in action here. All right, so what do we actually have to do to write a strong intro paragraph for just about any paper that I'm ever going to write ever? Like I said, high school, college, literature, regular argument, any of those things. Well, the first thing that we want to do is go for step one, and that is you actually want to plan a vacation by setting a destination. Now you might say that's a ridiculous metaphor. What are you talking about, right? But if you look at what it says in the blue here, it says have a thesis in mind. Now that might sound interesting because the thesis is typically in these types of academic settings the last sentence of your intro paragraph, and yet I'm saying step one should be you should have your thesis. But notice that step one for me is have your thesis in mind. I didn't say put it on your paper yet. I said have it in mind. Now, why would we want to do this? Well, we'd want to do this because this is kind of how we address things anyway. When we want to get somebody's attention to tell them something, we don't always run in and say our argument right away. What we do is we say, okay, I'm going to tell this person this idea, but I want to build up to it so that we can get there, right? An example that I give in my classroom for something like this is, let's say you want to go out on a school night and you know that your mom or dad or your guardian or whomever would always say no. So if you just walked in the house and you said to your parents or your guardian, I think it's appropriate that I go out tonight, chances are the answer is going to be no. That is not an effective claim that you are making, that you are going out tonight. It's not going to work. It's not going to cut it. So you know that that's where you're going to get to. So you have this kind of claim in mind here, I'm going to go out tonight, but you put it in your back pocket. You want to have it in mind because you want to know where you're going, right? But you can't actually walk in and say that, right? This is why I also call step one planning the vacation by setting a destination. How do you know what you're going to pack if you're like, I'm going on vacation, but you don't know where you're going? If I'm going to go to Florida, I'm going to pack very differently than if I'm going to Alaska, especially right now in the beginning of January. So I need to know where I'm headed so that I know how to actually start planning how to get there. So the destination for my intro paragraph is going to be my thesis. I need that in mind first. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do. once again, for the example that I'll just kind of articulate through here, we want to go out to the movies on a school night. And we know that our parents would say no, or our guardian would say no. So we just want to say, okay, I've got it in mind, but we're going to put it aside for right now. Step 1, have your thesis in mind. We move to step 2. Step 2 here is called channel your inner Spiderman, not fisherman. Yes. And please note, this is so important. A lot of times my students come into my classroom and they're like, oh, we have to write a hook for our essay. And I'm like, at no point in my life do I ever want you to call the beginning of your intro paragraph a hook ever again. Because quite honestly, the only time I ever think about hooks is when I'm fishing. And I do not want your intro paragraph to metaphorically be like you shoving metal through my cheek, dragging me out of my natural habitat, and then standing over me while you watch me suffocate. Not what we're going for here, okay? However, what I want to do is this. I want you to channel your inner Peter Parker, your inner Spider-Man. I want you to shoot some webs at me. Why? A hook, incredibly uncomfortable. A web, though, I could be flying around, I can get stuck in that web, and at least it's soft. I might not want to be there, but it's soft. So I'm stuck there, I'm engaged, but at least, even though I don't want to be there, I'm going to be a little bit comfortable here. So notice what's happening here. Step 2 is we are going to engage our audience with the topic at hand. Now, if you notice down here, I actually have a little asterisk here where it says channel your inner Spider-Man, engage your audience. And I actually, if you scroll down in this document, I actually have 8 ways to engage your audience with examples here, okay? And sure enough, those examples down here, right, they're not actually all true, by the way, but they're just examples of ways that you can engage your audience where it can be meaningful. On top of that, I'm going to actually just switch my tab here for a minute. If you were to go to thegardenofenglish.com, you can actually purchase poster files or purchase posters from our store that is Web Your Reader. The reason why I use the word web is because that's the first movement of that classical oration structure, right? The classical argument structure, which is also called the oration structure, goes from web to background to partition. And those are actually the 3 moves that we want to do in our intro paragraph. We want to web our reader, that's engage our reader. Here are 8 ways to do it. And once again, you'll see those same 8 ways down here with examples. And so we want to say, okay, how do I engage my audience to get them beginning to understand where I'm going to get to my thesis? So think about how this looks in your life. When you know you want to go out on a school night and you know you're not going to be allowed to, or you're typically not allowed to, you don't just run in and say it. You go in and you look at your guardian or mom or dad and you say, hey, Mom, I really need to talk to you about something, but first I got to go upstairs and do a couple things. And sure enough, off you go. And what's going to happen in that moment? Mom or dad or guardian is going to be like, what does that person want? Well, the second that person thinks, what does my son or daughter or whoever want, that means you have actually engaged them. So we want to think about how do we actually engage our audience with the topic, and it might be a topic that they don't even want to hear about. But sure enough, if you actually think of this in a creative manner, you can create a really strong engagement here, and we want to do that. We want to web our audience, and like I said, there are ways that you can web your audience right down here, okay? So step 1, have where you want to get to in mind. Step 2, think about how you can initially engage with your audience and make it exciting, not boring, please, okay? If you just do the broad to specific, that is ridiculously boring. Try something new, try something enriching, and I think that you'll actually have a lot of fun trying to figure that out. How can we engage? Okay? After we think about how we engage our audience, we're going to write a little 2 to 4 sentence engaging element there. We're going to then shift to step 3. And step 3 is about exploring background. Okay, this is the second movement in the classical structure. So the first movement's the web, the second movement is the background. How do you then contextualize your argument? What you want to do is you want to give a little bit of history that brings us to understand why we're talking about the issue, and you want to bring in perspectives about what people are saying about the issue. So if we were to use this this example that I'm talking about for going out for the movies, think about this. We walk in the house, we engage. All right, hey, what's going on, Mom? I want to talk to you about something, but I'm going to go upstairs and take care of a couple things first. Off you go. Mom's engaged because she's saying, what is going on here? I want to know what so-and-so wants. Okay? And then sure enough, you come downstairs, and what's the next thing that you do? you say, all right, Mom, I've actually finished all of my work and my responsibilities for the day. I've walked the dog, I've fed the dog, I've cleaned up my room, I've done my homework. You give some history there. And then you also say something along the lines of, I met, Sally Jane's mom after school today, and I know that you actually get along with her really well, and she has a rule in her house that no one's allowed out on a school night. And then your mother is like, or your father or your guardian is like, oh yeah, same rule here, same rule here. And you're like, interestingly enough, she invited me to go out to the movies tonight with Sally Jane, and she even said that she would drive and she would pay. Okay, so she's changed her rules. And so notice what's happening here. What I did was I provided some background. I did all my chores and everything like that. I was also then contacted by Sally Jane's mom. And now we're setting ourselves up to segue into what we call the partition. So the background, what we're going to do is we're going to say, here's what happened in terms of history. Here's what's been said about it. And notice I did that in my little example of what we would naturally do. I did this. I took care of my chores. You typically say this. She typically says this. And now that we have this background set up, we're going to then partition to step 4 for us, which is revise your thesis and tack it on to the end of your intro. And so what happens here in our example is we've engaged mom with the, hey, what's up? I need to talk to you. We've come downstairs. We've given the history. And then sure enough, we're like, her mom changed her mind. I know this is what you've said. I'm fulfilled all of my responsibilities. By the way, her mom is driving. And now it makes sense to tack your thesis on, which is going to be, so I was thinking it would be appropriate that I could go out tonight, seeing as though that I actually have free time. And sure enough, when you ask your mom, dad, or guardian that, or when you tell them that you find that appropriate, what's the response now? Well, it's still no. But we gave it a really valiant effort. And this valiant effort actually is an effort here that brings us to understand that we already talk like this. How do we engage people? Where do we then move to? And then how do we get to our claim? This is what you do when you are excited about something, but you want to tell the story behind it to get to the claim, right? When you run into the lunchroom and you're like, hey, what's up? This is what you actually do when you wave to somebody before you begin talking to them. When you wave to that person, that's your engagement. Then you start talking a little bit about like what's going on in your life, and then you can actually begin to make claims. So because we do this naturally, it makes sense to do this in our intro paragraphs as well. We're going to say, here's what I want for my thesis, but the intro paragraph actually starts at step 2. Step 1 tells us where we're going to get to, but you begin writing your intro paragraph at step 2. So if you look at this guide here, right, we're going to scroll down, and I have this guide. It's written kind of like a textbook, which explains everything that I just talked about, okay? But you're going to notice that after my page here about ways to channel your inner Peter Parker, I have examples for argument, examples for literary arguments, examples for literary analysis. This Catcher in the Rye example actually comes from one of my graduate papers. I have an example here about an argument that's based on religion and philosophy, and that was done for another graduate course that I did. I also have a nice relatable example for students. And you'll notice that in the parentheses here of my examples, it might say option 6, option 1-7, option 8, option 1, option 8, option 1. I'm just pointing out which options of the web I decided to choose when I wrote those examples so that you can see that here. Now, one last thing about this document that I want to point out, you'll notice that I do have number 2 crossed out. The reason why is because it's the most lousy way to start an intro paragraph, but some people need to start this way, just making a broad statement. I got to tell you, though, this is really the most not interesting way to do so. So I encourage you to try 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, okay? By the way, I am well aware that this story about Michael Jordan is not true, so let's pretend this is a different Michael Jordan, okay? But sure enough, there was a similar story for Michael Jordan, and so therefore you can kind of see what I was going for with that. Now, this right here, once again, this guide is right down below. It's fully explained there with examples, and really this is the most versatile and natural way to write an intro paragraph. It's much more natural than writing an upside-down triangle that just goes from broad to specific, and it's also way more engaging. And because of that, it's going to be much more sophisticated in helping your writing. I really encourage you to check out my examples. You'll also notice one last thing, that in my examples, I have actually labeled the parts. So where did I web? That's number 2. Where did I then shift to the background in the partition? The background, that's where it's labeled as 3. And then where do I actually tag my thesis on at the end? That's labeled as 4/1 in a lot of these here. Okay, so you can actually see me going through the steps. They're labeled for you in here in each one of these examples. If you found this video helpful, I'm going to ask that you actually just click like and subscribe, because it's the easiest way that you can actually help the Garden of English grow. But please also know that we offer a full range of services on our website. We got a new website. It's thegardenofenglish.com. And on that website, if you're looking for an individual tutor, you can contact us and we can kind of work to set that up. If you're looking for some help as a teacher, or if you're looking for some assistance or some coaching for an entire staff, we will run professional development as well. And if you're looking for an artist, we have an artist that I can get you in touch with as well. And she's absolutely incredible. In fact, she even did all the artwork for the posters that we have. On top of that, you can follow us on Facebook and just shoot us a like there. You can also follow us on Instagram as well. And of course, at the very end of all of this, you can do none of that because these videos are free and you can just tune in and work on what you need. But this intro paragraph will help you, and this structure will help you for any essay that you have to write in almost any subject, except, like I said at the beginning of the piece, a rhetorical analysis paper's intro paragraph needs to be just a little bit different, but we have a video for that too. Well, until next time, I hope to see you soon. But until then, I hope you all have a great one.